What's up, suckers? You know what my favorite thing about running a channel dedicated to ADHD is? Go on, guess. No, not that. Not that either. Okay, I'm just going to tell you. You're never going to guess. It's the bullshit that I get in comments about ADHD. And by bullshit, I don't mean stuff that is well-meaning but just incorrect. I mean, this is like bad faith, totally debunked over and over again bullshit that people just like to say because it makes them feel, I don't know, better about themselves. I'm not quite sure what their reasoning is, but it makes me itchy and it annoys me, and I have the microphone and you don't.
So you will listen to every damn word I have to say!
Before we get into dispelling these 5 myths that I hear over and over and over again, if this is your kind of channel, if this is your kind of thing, please make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you're like, what is this thing? It's a channel about ADHD apps, about ADHD life problems. I am a former ADHD coach who knows a ton about ADHD, who also has ADHD, and who is clearly trying to see how many times she can say ADHD in the intro to her video. How many times was that? Somebody tell me in the comments. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the 5 ADHD myths that irritate the absolute shit out of me and why they're not true. So myth number 5 is that ADHD is a kid's disease, that it is often used to control children. I still don't get why it is that we are saying this in this day and age. I'm not sure if it just feels better to people to be allowed to say this. I'm not sure if they haven't looked into the numbers. I'm not sure what's going on, but people are still obsessed with talking about ADHD in connection to children or infantilizing adults who have ADHD. And it's frankly it's incorrect. Just as of October of last year, the CDC reported that 1 in 16 American adults, that's about 15.5 million people, are ADHD diagnosed. And that's just the people who have come forward because they think they might have it. Some others who probably are like, ADHD is just a children's disease, have not actually gotten diagnosed. So imagine how many more people probably actually have ADHD. Now, to be fair, ADHD can start in childhood. You can have signs of it, symptoms of it. I know that I had certain things when I was a child that definitely pointed in the ADHD direction. I've talked about this before, and it didn't actually get worse until after I had children. If you cycle estrogen and progesterone on a regular basis, or even on a semi-regular basis, or on an irregular basis, it's totally and completely possible that you are going to see a worsening of symptoms as an adult. I actually did a video on this. It's a good one. You should go check it out. But the point being, this is not something that just happens to kids. Adults can have ADHD too. A lot of adults have ADHD too. And just in case there are conspiracy theorists out there like, yeah, but that's just because they're just saying that you have ADHD so that they can give you the drugs to. These people did not go to get diagnosed. Like, they didn't get the diagnosis like in the mail without asking. These people went to get diagnosed because they suspected that something was up, and something was up. They had ADHD. So either millions upon millions of adults are super broken and unaware of the fact that they're dealing with a children's disease and that they're older than the age of 6, or you're just trying to infantilize the disease because you still don't completely understand what it actually is. And I also want to say, I don't like calling ADHD a disease. Sometimes I am going to wind up using that term because it is a term that is still sometimes used in documentation about ADHD, but we'll get into it later. I don't really think that ADHD is a disease or disorder. We'll discuss that in a bit. So myth number 4 is that people with ADHD have to be hyperactive and they can't focus on anything. Here's the thing about that. There are a lot of people who are hyperactive. And sometimes I'm jealous of them. Do you know why? Because I'm not hyperactive at all. As a matter of fact, like most women, physically, I actually deal with more fatigue than I deal with hyperactivity. I don't often feel the energy to jump all over the place. And I sometimes wish I did, even though I know there are going to be people in the comments saying it's a living hell being hyperactive too. And I'm not saying it's not. All I'm saying is that hyperactivity is not something that you have to be ADHD. In fact, it's pretty well agreed upon in the community that ADHD is not well named. There's the attention deficit portion and the hyperactivity portion, and those two bring up this image in people's minds that's not really the whole picture. For example, I already mentioned hyperactivity doesn't necessarily have to mean in the body. A lot of women have actually been underdiagnosed or were missed when it came to childhood diagnosis because they assumed that hyperactivity was needed in order to be ADHD. But these women still had a hard time focusing. And if their bodies moved like their brains moved, then they'd never sit the fuck down. I was one of those kids. My mind is consistently jumping from thing to thing to thing. And that is a form of hyperactivity in itself. So that was one thing that wasn't true. And then we talk about focus. And they'll say, I actually made this same mistake when I was trying to figure out if my son had it. And it's because it's something that you hear quite often, which is, don't tell me that you can't focus or that he can't focus or that she can't focus or they can't focus, whoever. Because when you sit them in front of a video game, they can play that for hours. And that's because I hadn't heard, and a lot of people have not heard of hyperfocus. Okay? If there is something that is twinging that old pleasure center over and over and over again, that reward center, if it's keeping things novel and interesting and exciting over and over and over again, of course we can sit in front of it for hours. And just in case you're one of those people who likes to turn everything into an invalidation and you say, well, everybody can focus on things that they're excited about. True. But you can also force yourself to focus on things that you are not excited about. People with ADHD, especially severe ADHD, genuinely can't. Or they can, but it has to take hours and hours of prep, hours and hours of working with themselves, cutting things into chunks, taking lots and lots of breaks, being gentle with themselves when they don't get as much done as they absolutely want to. It is not as simple as just saying, okay, I don't want to do this thing, but I'm going to sit down and do it. It's prep, lots of prep. So, no, it's not the same. ADHD is really shittily named. I don't even know if shittily is a word, but we're going to go with it. And I'm just moving on to myth 3 now. All right, so myth number 3 is that ADHD is just an excuse. People just use it as an excuse. It's not that bad. Everybody has it, yada, yada, yada. So I am going to do something that the internet hates these days, and I'm going to inject some nuance into the situation. I think that there are people out there who do use ADHD as an excuse. And in fact, I had a conversation very early on in my career where I was talking to people about the difference, the line between having ADHD and it being the truth and using it as an excuse. I get people in my comments all the goddamn time using ADHD as an excuse. They tend to tell me that even though there are tons of different ways that they could watch a video that's 15 minutes long, that there's something wrong with me because I made a video that was 15 minutes long. My ADHD is you're going to make a video that's 15 minutes long and make me watch it when I have ADHD? A, not making you watch it. B, it's not up to the rest of the world to figure out how your ADHD works. You have to figure out how to make it work. You have to learn how to work with it. And it is not uncommon for, people to show up super duper late to things over and over again and then tell their friends, well, I have ADHD. If you are using your ADHD as a reason to mistreat people, to not have to move an extra step, to not treat yourself right, you are using it as an excuse. However, If you have, say again, we're talking about that time management person, and you show up late, you realize you do, you know that it frustrates your friends, so you set multiple alarms. You generally tend to show up super early to things actually because you set your alarms really crazy, or you just do whatever you can to try to show up on time, and you miss a day, and you're like, I'm so sorry, I'm working with my ADHD as hard as I can, I just have time blindness. That is the truth. That's not an excuse. And if someone tries to say you're using your ADHD as an excuse, no, you're not. Because you are doing what you can to work with what you've got, to work with your brain, and you are doing your damnedest to try to treat everybody correctly, to treat yourself correctly, to do the things that need to be done. So there is definitely a rash of people who use their ADHD as an excuse. And I'm sure I'm going to have people who are going to get mad at me in the comments and be like, how dare you? My brain, it's different. And it's like, yes, it is different. But if you are just like, my brain, it's different, suck it up. You need to figure out when it is your responsibility to work with those differences and when it is someone else's responsibility to accept them. Those are two different things. They can both exist. Two things can be true at the same time. I want to make it clear that if you are just saying that a person who struggles with being given more than 3 commands at a time is asking you not to give them more than 3 commands at a time because they have ADHD and they'll forget, and you tell them they're coming up with excuses, you're the asshole. You, not them, because they've told you that they know what they are capable of doing. They want to do well by you. They give a shit enough to want to do well by you. And if you are telling them that they are inconveniencing you and therefore it must be an excuse, the problem's with you. This is a nuanced situation. There is a difference. Every time someone uses ADHD, it is not an excuse. That's that. Moving on. Myth number 2 kind of gets on my nerves in a very big way, even though no one has said it to me, even though no one I think would say it to my face. So I don't know, maybe they have said it about me. But it's that shitty parenting causes ADHD. And I used to actually work in the parenting blogosphere, and the amount of shaming that I see amongst parents makes me so irritated, because I think that there are just some people out there who don't realize that parenting is such a specialized thing that you really aren't going to be able to pass judgment on anything that outside of like giving your kids the most basic things. Like if someone's not feeding their kid or clothing their kid or showing their kid love, that you can judge. But like you generally cannot judge what you see of another person's family life because you don't live with them for 24/7. You don't know what their kids are actually doing. There's just a very ignorant base out there that feels like they know everything that there is to know about parenting other people's kids. And it's fucking irritating. And it gets even more irritating when we're talking about something that has been studied so heavily that, even though I shouldn't say it's been studied heavily, it hasn't been studied anywhere near enough, but it's been studied enough that we know that parenting really doesn't play a huge part in the manifestation of ADHD symptoms. So, and I mean, don't get me wrong, an abusive home can definitely worsen ADHD symptoms, or it can cause ADHD-like behaviors in children. For example, if you have abusive parents, you could definitely see a child being a little bit more scattered in their thinking, having a hard time focusing, being distracted, being unable to remember important facts. A kid that is being given nothing to eat is obviously going to have a hard time focusing. And if a kid's got a parent who's giving them Fanta and Cheetos for breakfast every morning, there is a chance that they will exhibit greater hyperactivity than children who eat a healthy breakfast. But that being said, you could be the best parent in the world. You could be the literal mother of the year, which, by the way, is not just an award that you give out of sarcasm like I thought it was. It's a real thing. Sat next to the winner of 2018 on a plane once. Who knew? You could be an amazing parent and still have a child who has ADHD. And I don't like this saying. I actually wrote this in a script and did not write this part, but I'm thinking about it now. And I really especially do not like this saying or this myth, this attitude, because it also implies that a kid with ADHD is bad and a failure somehow. That like you had to have fucked something up to have a kid with ADHD, because who would want one of those? Those are broken. Those are bad. And it's like, there are going to be things that you are going to have to change about your behavior and the way that you handle the world and the way that you look at things. But ADHD kids are creative. They're intelligent. They are genuinely excited about things when you get them into the right things. Why wouldn't you want a kid like that? Like, the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, this attitude is horrible on so many different levels. Like, not only are you shitting on someone's parenting, but you're also acting like their kid's a fucking fuck. I had to stop that rant early and cut out the swear and the flipping off of the camera because I realized that I could get demonetized with that. So you get my point. Anyway, if you do any reading, simple reading, you'll find that the main causes of ADHD, two of the main causes of ADHD, are thought to have to do with genes and biology. And it makes a lot of sense because you generally tend to find it in families. I'm ADHD, so is my son. My daughter suspects that she might be. I have family members who are ADHD, and so are their parents. It's honestly not unheard of to have things like this. So it's totally possible that that is playing into things. And a lot of experts, people who are much, much smarter than me, suspect that it probably is. So as much as you'd like to blame the couple sitting at the table next to you who allowed their kids to watch an iPad for 30 minutes, chances are that kid was probably already ADHD, and either mom or dad are too. So eat your carbonara and worry about yourself. And finally, myth number 1, the one that makes me every time I see it, is that ADHD does not exist, and that the guy who came up with the concept rescinded it on his deathbed. Guys, okay. No. Video's over. No, I'm just kidding. But it kills me because I have found that there are a certain group of people out there who, when they hear something that sounds too big for them, too scary for them, the best way that they have found to deal with the complicated feelings they might be having about it is to imagine a monster under the bed that is much easier to control. And usually that monster is human beings. ADHD is very scary. It's a scary concept. It's not something I fully understand. So it's a lot easier to imagine that a man made up the concept and that he even admitted that it doesn't exist. So it's fake. It's all fake and we're safe. And it's like, no, you have too many things to prove that that's not true. And I mean, I understand. I'm not expecting everybody to do their research on ADHD because not as many people care about it as I do. But ADHD is not new. It's been around for about 200 years at this point. People have been researching it on and off for centuries. And we are now getting to the point where it's being researched more and more. But it's not something that someone just made up. It was something that people suspected might exist so far back that some dude in Scotland was talking about it before people figured it out in the United States. And then on top of that, this guy that you're talking about who came up with the concept and rescinded it on his deathbed, none of that was true. The guy that you're talking about is Dr. Leon Eisenberg. And first off, not only did he not make up ADHD, but he was just a guy who studied it. He was just considered a major player in the early studies of the disorder. The words that people keep saying about him rescinding it on his deathbed, he wasn't dying, okay? It was in an interview, and he actually said The exact words that people like to bring up are, and I quote, ADHD is a fictitious disease. What he meant by that in context, when thrown into his native German, because by the way, these words were also taken and translated to English, so they lost some of their nuance, there's that word again, is that Eisenberg disagreed pretty strongly with the idea that ADHD had strong genetic ties. He felt that ADHD actually had more to do with nurture than nature, that had more to do with social interaction than it did with who your mom and dad were. So he was basically saying everybody has turned it into this disease that you can't help to get, but I actually think that it is something that can be caused by outside external influences. A better way of looking at it is he was trying to say it's more than just a disease. Which, by the way, kind of shows that not only are you guys quoting the wrong guy, but Eisenberg was also proven wrong. Look at myth number 2 if you need to see that. He was saying that it didn't have a strong genetic component, and a lot of studiers are finding that it probably does. So you're also quoting a guy who wasn't even right. And by the way, I have said this before and I'm going to say it again. I don't actually think that ADHD is a disorder. And I think that if we give it a few more years, eventually it's going to be considered just another brain type or a certain way that people think, a certain kind of brain type. There are just way too many people coming to realize that their minds work this way or think this way or that their neurons fire this way for it to be considered a disorder for long. That's just my rather uneducated prediction, but I would not be surprised if after a while that ADHD is no longer a D. D's nuts. So there you are. Those are the main myths that I hear every time that I post. I'm sure that I will hear more. So maybe I will wind up doing this video again at some point. Everybody knows how smart it is to tell the internet everything that irritates me, because there's no way in hell that that could continue or go wrong in any shape or form. For those of you who watch regularly, thank you and welcome back. For those of you who are new, welcome. So glad that you're here. If this was good information for you, a good video, you really had a great time, then please make sure that you like and subscribe and drink plenty of water. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.